They dragged the brothers out one by one and stood them in a line beside a single flat stone. The stone had been chosen for its convenience, broad enough for a man to kneel upon, smooth enough for the blade to do its work, but it might as well have been an altar. The cries of Gideon's house, 70 sons of Jerubbaal, rose above the oaks of Ophrah and fell back dead upon the ground. Steel hissed, a neck bared, a body pitched forward, and the stone drank another life. Abimelech watched, jaw clenched, as blood fed the dust he had stirred up with his own ambition. He told himself this was necessity, not cruelty. He told himself a throne required sacrifices, and it was better that they be his brothers than himself. The path to that stone had been laid in the long shadow of Gideon's victories. When Israel had begged the old warrior to rule, Gideon refused. "The Lord shall rule over you," he said. But when a man cuts down idols and wins battles, people begin to imagine crowns, even if he won't put one on. Gideon kept many wives and fathered many sons. Among them was Abimelech, born to a concubine in Shechem. The city remembered Abimelech as one of their own, half-blood to Israel and Canaan both, a bridge between worlds, or a blade that could cut them apart. After Gideon died, the tribes were restless and afraid. Altars rose again to the Baal of the covenant, and whispers asked, "Who will lead us now?" Abimelech went to Shechem and stood before his mother's kin. He did not speak of faith or right. He spoke of fear and convenience. "Is it better," he asked, "that 70 rule over you, or one? Remember also that I am your bone and your flesh." It was not a plea. It was a proposition. The city elders listened, fingers tapping the armrests of their chairs, and weighed 70 possible claimants against one man willing to remove them all. They went to the temple of Baal-berith and counted out silver, enough for a small army of ruthless men who valued coin above conscience. With that money, Abimelech bought himself companions who would not ask questions when told to sharpen their knives. They rode to Ophrah and found Gideon's sons. The executioners worked without hurry, as if the bloodshed were a ceremony that deserved precision. The brothers fell in the rough order of their birth, lives ended at the same stone, names terminated at the same breath. Only one escaped. Jotham, the youngest, nimble and terrified, who fled toward the hills and did not stop until the wind tore his voice raw. Later he climbed Mount Gerizim and looked down on Shechem. The city that had paid for slaughter glimmered like a treasure he could not touch. Jotham called for silence, and his words rolled down the slopes like stones tumbling into a valley. He told a parable, trees in search of a king. They asked the olive, which refused to lose its oil. They asked the fig, which would not surrender its sweetness. They asked the vine, which would not give up its wine. At last they turned to the bramble, a worthless thorn bush that offered shade it could not provide and threatened fire for those who would not bow. "If you have acted in truth," Jotham cried to Shechem, "rejoice in Abimelech, and let him rejoice in you. But if not, let fire come out from Abimelech and devour the men of Shechem, and let fire come out from Shechem and devour Abimelech." Then he ran for his life, because truth has always required swiftness when spoken against power. They set a crown on Abimelech's head beside the terebinth pillar. He reigned 3 years, calling himself king, though no prophet anointed him. He looked the part: hard eyes, firm hands, a voice that carried orders across courtyards, and for a time people bowed. But the Lord sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the men of Shechem. Distrust crept into banquets and sat down at the table. The city regretted the bargain it had made. The bramble's shadow was thin, and its thorns were real. Into this unease walked a man named Gaul, son of Ebed, a talker with a soldier's swagger. He watched the harvest festival ripen into drunken courage and lifted his cup. "Who is Abimelech?" he asked. "And who is Shechem, that we should serve him? Isn't this the son of Jerubbaal? Didn't he kill his brothers? Serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem. If I were in charge, I'd drive him out." Wine made the crowd brave, cheers rose, promises swelled. Rebellion wore a smile and shook hands. But Zebul, the city's governor and Abimelech's loyalist, heard the boasting and sent word secretly to the king. His message was simple: come by night, hide in the fields. At dawn, when Gaul struts before the gate, pounce. Abimelech came as instructed. The next morning, Gaul squinted toward the hills and swore he saw men descending. Zebul mocked him. "Shadows," he said. "The heat plays tricks." But the dust line grew, and the tricks turned into soldiers. By then, it was too late. Abimelech fell upon Gaul's band, scattered them with iron and rage, and drove the braggart from the city. Zebul expelled him. Abimelech's teeth were set for a stronger bite. The next day, the people of Shechem ventured out to the fields, as if the earth itself could shelter them from politics. Abimelech divided his men into 3 companies and sprang the trap. He massacred the workers, seized the city, and broke its spine. He tore down houses, toppled walls, and sowed the land with salt, an old curse declaring the ground barren and the future denied. Those who survived ran to the stronghold of the temple of El-Berith, a tower thick with stone and desperate hope. The God of the covenant had been traded for a covenant with Baal, and now that God's house became a fortress for people who had misplaced mercy. Abimelech did not batter the tower, he burned it. He cut branches from the forest of Zalman, piled them against the stronghold, and ordered his men to do likewise. Flames climbed, smoke roared, and heat curled the hair of children as families screamed behind stone that glowed like coals. About 1,000 died there, men and women consumed by fire in the house they thought sacred. Jotham's curse flared into life. Fire from Abimelech devoured Shechem, but the bramble's blaze does not choose its fuel. From Shechem, Abimelech marched to Thebez, a lesser city that had watched and learned and did not intend to surrender. Again the people fled to a tower, again the king ordered wood stacked, again he strode forward to light the heap. A woman climbed the parapet with an upper millstone, the hand-sized stone used to grind grain each day, and peered down through smoke at the man who had turned the land to ash. She hoisted the stone, heart pounding, arms shaking with the knowledge that she might end a tyrant or miss and die for trying. She let go. Gravity finished what justice had begun. The stone fell true, cracked Abimelech's skull, and drove him to his knees. Even dying, he worried more about reputation than repentance. He called to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and kill me, so they won't say, 'A woman killed him.'" The young man obeyed. The king who had believed a throne could be purchased with silver and blood met the end he feared most, a nameless death framed by a woman's courage. When Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, they went each to his own place. The war ebbed away as suddenly as it had risen. The text says, God returned the evil of Abimelech upon his head and repaid the men of Shechem for their guilt. Justice, long delayed, did not fail to arrive. Jotham's parable lingered in the air like smoke that refuses to clear. A nation had asked a bramble for shade and discovered that thorns tear at anyone who leans upon them. The olive had kept its oil, the fig its sweetness, the vine its wine. Only the worthless bush had accepted the crown and, once crowned, demanded fire. Abimelech called himself king, but he never learned to shepherd. He only learned to cut, and in cutting others, he carved away his own future. There is a kind of leadership that begins at a single stone and ends beneath a single stone. It starts with expedience, hire thugs, buy loyalty, silence brothers, and it ends with the weight of a millstone falling from the hands of someone whom history would have ignored had injustice not given her a task. The book remembers neither her name nor her lineage, only the angle of her courage and the sound of a skull breaking open. That is the judgment written in bone when power forgets its purpose. Abimelech's story was told around small fires for generations, not because people enjoyed the horror of it, but because they understood how easily a people can choose bramble over fruit, swagger over wisdom, speed over righteousness. Shechem wanted a strong hand and got a burning brand. The men who funded the first crime died trapped in their temple by the very man they had purchased. The king who murdered brothers to secure his throne could not secure his own pulse against a stone the size of a loaf of bread. And the God whom Gideon honored repaid evil with exactness, fire for treachery, collapse for pride, silence for a voice that boasted too loudly. If you listen carefully at the edge of that field, where the city once stood salted and sterile, you can still hear the echo of Jotham's cry rolling down Gerizim. It warns towns and families and hearts not to bargain with brambles, not to call ruin a remedy, not to imagine that a crown offered to a thorn bush will become anything but a torch. And if you stand in the gate of Thebez, you can look down and see the place where a woman lifted her millstone and proved that heaven does not need famous hands to carry out its verdicts. Thank you for listening to Divine Crime. Subscribe for more true stories from the most dangerous book ever written.